Hi everyone, time for some Tetris and talking today. How are you? I'm Rolling Redneck. I updated OBS recently, so there might be some kinks in the recording. Last week there was an eclipse, and there was also a bunch of people who thought the eclipse would be the Rapture. Of course, it wasn't the Rapture. And that brings me to the subject of why there wasn't a Rapture. And everyone in my family's going to hate when I say this. The Rapture is a scam. There isn't going to be a Rapture, and there's never going to be a Rapture. I know all of you are thinking, oh, but there are signs. People in the Middle East are fighting. They do that every week. Saying the Rapture, the Middle Eastern fighting is a sign of a prophecy being fulfilled is like saying a hurricane hitting Florida is a sign of a prophecy being fulfilled. And if someone doesn't like my Middle Easterners are always fighting comment, well, tell them to stop fighting. They don't like hearing it. Anyway, let's get on to let's get on to a little bit of history of what is currently known as end times theology or rapture theology, whatever you want to call it. It was dreamed up by some dude named John Darby, and there were a couple other contemporaries, including a woman who claimed she had received visions. Now, considering that in the 1800s you were allowed to put darn near anything to the water supply, sell cocaine and Coca-Cola, or, pass radioactive material off as medicine, I am a little skeptical about anyone claiming they had visions in 1867. And you know what? So were most people. Rapture theology was basically fringe theology. It was basically kind of like how Gnosticism is regarded today. But what changed? How does a fringe theology that was basically nearly defunct by the time of the 20th century get back on its feet? Especially a theology that basically offers nothing but weird conspiracy theories. Well, I'll tell you how. Investment. Now, you might regard this as a conspiracy theory, and you have the right to regard it that way. But after nearly a century of rapture people claiming everything is a conspiracy against them, maybe y'all should indulge me here. The rapture was basically dead until the 60s and 70s, until such time as a bunch of people who formerly were just people in the backwoods, with backwoods churches that were barely standing up, suddenly got enough money for TV stations, crystal cathedrals, and all that junk. Now, I'm no economist or anything, but usually when your church is barely treading water, you're not getting the money to make it not tread water and, in fact, expand to the point of crystal cathedrals and TV station operations from Aunt Beulah's Social Security check. That's just not going to happen. In order to find the answer to what happened, how this fringe theology suddenly got legs again to the point that it's a genuine danger to the survival of the human species, we'll get to that later. We have to look at what else was going on at the time. In the 60s and 70s, a bunch of people started getting interested in the whole protecting the environment thing. You know, some people had this radical idea that dumping literal human waste everywhere in all the rivers and toxic gunk in the sea, clear cutting everything we can just for funsies was probably a bad idea. Not only that, some people considered it unchristian. Remember that God commanded us to take care of the earth, if he existed. But that is literally a command, as far as what the Bible says. The Bible also, incidentally enough, doesn't really say anything about the rapture. Somebody just kind of filled in the blanks, like people like John Darby and people who might have been on hallucinogenic drugs. Again, let's be real, 1867, anything was going into food. But back to 1967. A lot of Christians didn't really care for the hippie movement, but they did agree with the general philosophy that we should not be contaminating the earth beyond the point that human life would be unsustainable. So Richard Nixon in the 70s created the EPA, and a lot of big corporations were getting their rear ends handed them in court. And yes, I am making a conscious effort not to swear. The EPA and everybody else, they were like all over the various companies. It's like, no, you can't put your oil waste in the rivers. No, the river should not be catching on fire. These were apparently radical concepts. And again, Christians were mostly on board with this stuff because most of them didn't really believe that they would be poofed away at the last minute. Which again brings us to the megachurches, the Raptured churches. Now, interesting thing to note if you're not in America, church finance books are basically closed to the government. If you wanted to flood your local church with a bunch of dark money, you totally could, and no one in the government would know or even be able to stop you. And now we reach the crux of my theory. Rapture theology was financed. Again, most of these churches were backwoods, barely standing on their own support beams. one minor disaster away from closing, and then somehow they get the money to start a TV operation. I don't buy it. Somebody invested in these churches. And what was the main goal of these investments? To make it so that America's largest religion didn't put up much of a fight when big companies were doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. Things like pouring junk into rivers, committing any number of white collar crimes, things like that. Again, I'm sure a lot of you find this theory hard to believe. But again, I've heard the Rapture people share a whole host of hard to believe theories, and nobody questioned them. So permit me my own theory. Darn it. Okay, now I'm done being bad at Tetris. So by the time all this rapture theology takes off, suddenly people believe that they are getting poofed away. That the environment isn't their problem. That anything more immediate than their own inconvenience isn't their problem. And furthermore, it makes the church far more conspiratorial. The main crux, I think, the problem with the church today is that they think every minor inconvenience, anything a government to the left of Pinochet does, is some vast conspiracy against the church. A vast plan to put Christians in camps or whatever to make them renounce Jesus. Everything from any federal law ever to vaccine mandates to actually making your church accessible to the disabled is seen as a vast plan. And this, of course, makes it harder for the government to do things they need to do, like literally anything. And it makes the church more amenable to corporatism, letting them do whatever they want. After all, if you believe that everything the government does is a conspiracy against you, you won't believe the government should be allowed to do anything at all, even if it makes sense. And of course, all the big super financed megachurches have their doctrines passed down to the smaller churches. Anyone who has been raised in evangelical Christianity knows we don't really have a hierarchy so much as a distribution system. If the guy in the Crystal Cathedral on TV is preaching something, the guy in the rural backwoods church will be preaching it in about a month or so. And the thing is, the rapture is a scam. If you don't believe that anything is your problem, you're willing to let problems go unaddressed. And the people who profit from these problems make a boatload of money. There's nothing in the Bible about the rapture. There's nothing in the Bible about how the end of days is coming any day, anytime soon. Everyone says that the end times are happening now, and they've been saying it's been happening for 2,000 years. Let me tell you a secret, there are no end times. There are people just using the end times as an excuse to be really crappy. And they're using it as an excuse to not do anything about the people being really crappy. After all, if you've been told by your preacher that everything bad is happening because it's prophecy, then you won't want to do anything about all the bad things happening unless they're directly affecting you. But the thing about that is, if you're waiting for a problem to directly affect you until it is too, until you do anything about it, guess what? It is too late. It's too late for people in East Palestine, Ohio to protect their rivers and all that stuff because they waited until there was literal garbage in the river to demand that the federal government do something about garbage flowing into the river. But at the same time, before all the garbage flowed in the river, they chose to vote for people who would let garbage flow into the river because they thought they would be poofed away at the last minute before, again, garbage would go flowing into the river. But that's not how that works. If Rapture theology is all about the notion that someone else will come clean this mess up. It preaches that you can treat God like a butler and you can throw your own wild teenage trash throwing party, and God the butler will come pick you up after you've trashed the house and you're passed out on the couch and tuck you into bed. No, that's not how it works. A deity is not coming to save us from climate change or toxic rivers or anything like that. We have to do it ourselves and vote for people who will do it. Even if, you know, some of them might not have the same religious views you do. Now, if you want to continue believing in the Rapture scam, that's fine. I just wanted to present this argument. But if nothing else, for the love of God, the next eclipse, don't go telling your kids that you're going to be raptured today, you know, scaring the crap out of them. Because that ain't right either. Have a nice day.